I'll call this meeting to order, the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Public Works Committee, March 24th, 2015. I'm Councilmember Reich. I'll be chairing the committee with Councilmembers Yang, Glidden, Palmisano, Bender, and Gordon. We're a full complement of the committee. We have 19 items today in total, including a public hearing and some discussion and also consent items. I'll go through the consent items. Any committee member can pull any item if they wish. Starting in order, item 2 is use of city-owned infrastructure, setting a public hearing for April 7, 2015, to consider the subject matter of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Code of Ordinances relating to streets and sidewalks, adding a new chapter 451 to be entitled Use of City-Owned Infrastructure. And that's to establish a process and procedure for applicants to obtain permits to attach communications equipment of city-owned infrastructure and to consider a fee resolution establishing permit fees to attach equipment to city-owned infrastructure. Item 3 is approving a resolution designating location improvements for the 26th Street East, 28th Street East resurfacing project. Receive the cost estimates as stated and set the public hearing for May 5th, 2015. Item 4 is the Nicollet Mall reconstruction project. Approving a resolution designating the location of those improvements to be proposed for that project and receiving a cost estimate of $50 million, directing the city engineer to prepare proposed street construction special assessments against the full list of benefited properties and applying a uniform market valuation methodology developed by the consultant Shenahan Incorporated, or company rather, and directing the city engineer to prepare a separate and additional proposed street construction special assessments against those listed properties abutting the mall by applying the city standard street paving uniform assessment rate method, utilizing the 2015 uniform assessment rate, and then setting the public hearing for that project for May 5th, 2015. Item 5 is the Minnehaha Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. That'll go from 26th Street East to 24th Street East, and it's to approve the location, the cost estimate, and set the public hearing for May 5th, 2015. Item 6 is the Minneapolis Refuse Incorporated contract, and that's authorizing negotiation execution of that contract with MRI for the collection of garbage, recycling, problem materials, large items, mattresses, yard waste, and source separated organics for approximately 1/2 of the city's dwelling units for a 5-year term starting August 31st, 2015 through August 30th, 2020. That item will be referred to Ways and Means. Item 7 is the leakage assessment service contract, authorizing execution of a contract with Wakes Water Services for a price not to exceed $300,000 to conduct condition assessment survey for Minneapolis water distribution system. That will be referred to Ways and Means Committee. Item 8 is the St. Anthony Park Bridge over Burlington Northern Santa Fe Northtown Yards, and authorizing execution of a bridge bond grant agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for the distribution of state bridge bonds, and authorizing an increase to the engineering services of Short Elliott Hendrickson by $285,988 for a revised contract total of $2,812,331 to assist with the construction engineering, and extended the effective date of the contract through December 31st, 2017. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 9 is the 7th Street Transition Advantage Project. Execution of the agreement relating to the works to support the 7th Street Transit Advantage Project with the Metropolitan Council, and amending the 2015 capital budget by establishing the 7th Street Transit Advantage Project and increasing the appropriation of the project by $470,000, $140,000 of which will be the Metropolitan Council. The remainder will be from our permanent improvement tax levy. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 10 is authorizing an increase in the contract with Vortec Hydrovac Incorporated by $2,513.25 for storm sewer cleaning contract. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 11 is authorizing execution of a subordinate funding agreement with the Metropolitan Council for the Metropolitan Council to reimburse the City of Minneapolis for final survey, stormwater, sanitary sewer infrastructure constructed on the Central Corridor LRT Green Line. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 12 is receiving and filing the updated Plan 2015 Protected Bikeway Report. Item 13 is funding the Bike Week events, authorizing up to $15,000 in funding for the 2015 Bike Week by reallocating Public Works Traffic Program dollars. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 14 is approving the locations and budget for the 2015 Open Streets events. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 15 are accepting low responsive bid for Marge Magnuson Construction for $229,765 for double door pivot gate installation for a project at the water treatment plant. And then the final low bid is Graymont LLC for an estimated annual expenditure of $1,800,000 to furnish and deliver quicklime to the water treatment and distribution division. And I believe the following are all the low bids with the exception of C, which is a single bid of dresser trap rock for an estimated annual expenditure of $142,600 to furnish and deliver gray black Class A aggregate. And I believe we checked those prices against previous prices and found them consistent. Those are all the consent items. Does anyone wish to pull an item? Councilmember Gordon.
There's two items I'd like to comment on. I don't know if we have to pull them, but I wanted to comment on item 12, which is the Protected Bikeways project. I just really appreciate seeing this come forward. I did have a briefing with staff, and I also appreciated that in the briefing, as if it was nothing out of the ordinary, they said, well, one of the key criteria we looked at was try to analyze this based on a racial equity lens. And I just thought that was significant. The council did a lot of work on that, and we weren't sure. Basically, I think we tried to put some tools out there and get people to look at. So I just wanted to call our attention to that. The other is about open streets, number 14. I really appreciate that in the recommendation, there is some flexibility with Lake Street. There's been a lot of discussion about Lake Street, and the original concept has taken some adjustments along the way. I am enthusiastically supportive of going back to having it go straight on Lake Street and have it contiguous. I know that we are tentatively saying it could take this detour that will essentially, I believe, cut it into two open streets events. Some people might cross that detour, but I'm not sure. I also heard that there's already some positive discussions with Department of Transportation about getting it closed there. If people haven't seen the report, check it out if you have questions about what I'm saying. But my understanding is if we're able to solve those problems and have it without the detour, it'll come back to the committee for final approval.
Councilmember Gordon, you're correct, and that is being worked on by the various jurisdictions. So, and the council members of the area brought that to everyone's attention. Thanks. Councilmember Glidden, followed by Councilmember Yang, and then Councilmember Palmisano.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I know we have a full agenda today, and you also have a public hearing. But my question was also on item number 12, and a lot of my constituents are very excited about kind of rolling out the protected bikeways.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't get a briefing from staff, and I was going to ask, was there an opportunity just to have a brief comment from staff at some point during this meeting that tells us a little bit about why these items were chosen for the first go-round of using funding this year. And I do know that we are working towards having a plan, a multiple-year plan, and that will come before this committee later. So that was my question.
Certainly. I imagine, do we have staff here that could speak to the plan? How about we go through the consent items, and I'll pull that item for a brief overview, if that's okay with staff. I'm seeing yeses. Councilmember Yang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item number 6 and item number 13 for questions.
Sure.
So I'll put it on the list, or if you can put it on the list, just and attack whichever one you want to attack first.
Mm-hmm. So that was 6 and 6, 12, and 13. All right. Okay. Councilmember Palmisano?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to also pull item number 14 just to have a discussion about it.
Sure. Okay. So what I will do is I will move all items minus 6, 12, 13, and 14, and we'll have some further discussion with those in their numerical order. So with that, I move all other items minus those mentioned. All in favor, say aye.
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 And those carry. Now we will go with item 6, and that's the Minneapolis Refuse Incorporated contract. And I will yield the floor to. To Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't receive a brief on this. I'm wondering if Mr. Herberholz will give us a brief overview of this, and then I have a few questions with regards to the MRI contract.
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members, Councilmember Yang. A brief overview of the steps in this. Okay.
Yeah, or just the contract generally.
Yeah, overview. We just began the second year of the current MRI contract that was obtained through organized collection and an RFP process, and they were selected as the most qualified, best option vendor for us. With the introduction of organics collection in this current step of the contract, MRI was looking to have an extended period of time to amortize purchase of vehicles to be able to roll out their half of the organized collection of organics. And what we have discussed with them is basically until the point in time where the first organics collection phase 1 is began in September, we're going to extend the current terms of the contract to that point, and at that point have a new 5-year contract with new rates and terms so that they can amortize the purchase of their vehicles.
Okay, and so with MRA being contracted in the situation for the purposes of all these different things, including source separated organics, does that mean that their coverage area is going to be an area in which they will collect organics? Because I mean, I live in North Minneapolis, and MRI is my garbage hauler, and so are we going to see that pretty quickly, or is it going to be phased over time, in their coverage area?
The organics portion?
Right.
The organics portion, we just on Friday sent out maps of the phase 1 and phase 2. So we've got 25% of the organics program going to be rolled out this fall, and then the remaining 75% next spring. So it's pocketed throughout the city, and yes, there is a portion that MRI will be rolling out in their service area.
Okay.
I think in all wards are touched a portion of.
Okay, and I'm going to ask it like this. I hope it's clear. I know the other half of Minneapolis is covered by Public Works, and I'm wondering, I mean, are the costs pretty similar between MRI and the city in terms of doing this service?
I would say yes, committee member. Basically, both of our sides of the city, with anticipation of the needs for rolling out organics, are allocating 7 dedicated routes, and it's basically the same for both of us. The difference between MRI and us and the city side is that we absorb all the overhead for customer service and those items. They simply provide the collection.
Okay.
But as far as the idea behind it, the city's divided equally in number of units, and we anticipate using a similar number of trucks.
Okay, and you had mentioned a little bit earlier that MRI was in the middle of a contract, and so does this new contract supersede that contract?
It will.
Okay.
The current contract will end in September, and the new 5-year term will start then.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you very much.
the details. Okay, moving down the list, we have item 12, which is the Plan 2015 Protected Bikeway Projects. And if staff could come and field some queries from committee members.
Mr. Chair, Anna Flintoft will present this item.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, council members, Anna Flintoff, Transportation Planning and Engineering. We are developing a protected bikeway plan. We have a draft plan that has been presented to the Bicycle Advisory Committee and is currently undergoing review by our partner agencies. And we expect to be bringing that draft plan to TMPW on April 21st. And then we will be having a public review period and a public open house, and then bringing it back to council in May or in June for final approval. But we also have $790,000 in capital funding for 2015 for protected bikeway projects. And so that's what the letter before you today is about. It's just to let you know that it is our intent to pursue protected bikeway projects on Oak Street Southeast, Plymouth Avenue and 8th Avenue, Plymouth Avenue North and 8th Avenue Northeast, 26th and 28th Streets, which also have some additional funding, and 9th Street South and downtown. And we have not done public engagement on all of these projects. We have quite a bit of work to do on some of them. So we don't know for sure exactly what the end design is going to be, but that is our intent is to pursue those projects in 2015.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So my question in part was, how did you select these projects? Because
Yeah.
we just have the list of projects. I
Yeah.
didn't get a background on, was there a criteria or readiness factors? Can you just walk us through
Sure.
how you selected these geographic, diversity? I mean, all these things
Yeah.
I know often come into
Yeah.
play.
26th and 28th Streets have had a lot of public engagement and design work already done. So those projects were well on their way, and they needed a little bit of extra funding. Oak Street Southeast has also been in development for a number of months, and there has been some public engagement on that project to date. 9th Street South is going to be resurfaced this year, and so we wanted to try to coordinate with that resurfacing project, and we also wanted to pursue a project in downtown. And then Plymouth and 8th Northeast is a corridor that we thought would be fairly easy to deliver because it already has bicycle lanes, and we already have protected bike lanes on the bridge over the Mississippi River. So those 4 projects also provide some geographic diversity as well, serving downtown, southeast, North Minneapolis, and South Minneapolis.
Were there others that didn't make the cut?
Well, we've identified a number of other corridors for implementation between now and 2020. And so there's an additional $760,000 programmed for protected bikeways in 2016. And we are looking at what would be needed to fund the rest of the corridors in the plan.
Okay, all right, Councilmember Palmisano. Those questions are answered. Okay, moving down, we have item 13, and I believe that was Councilmember Yang's request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions with regards to this item. In the financial impact piece, it says that the request will change how the funds would be spent in 2015, and I'm wondering if this is typical of, I guess, how we do things. And if we can get staff to talk about that, that'd be great.
I could probably answer that. It's not typical. We had previously participated in this as a cost participant via staff time and that sort of thing. And then the most recent past was through a federal grant, a separate grant, which was available for this use. And so in the absence of that, in the absence of having any designated funds through the budgetary process, we had to do, I suppose you could say, an extraordinary effort to find some appropriately categorized funds, turn it around in a short time for the purpose of an event that people had indicated a strong desire to continue.
And Mr. Chair, with regards to the amount of money that's being spent on this event, does it impact the original program? I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Obviously, it'd have a marginal impact. The dollar, when you minus out dollars, you minus out dollars. Perhaps Director Hamilton could speak to that.
Walk safety money that was allocated to Public Works. And so we would be looking at doing fewer durable markings on the street.
Do we know how many fewer?
I'm going to look to Steve Mosing to see if he can step up to the microphone and tell us an approximate number of how many fewer.
Morning, Director Mosing.
Good morning. Steve Mosing, Traffic Operations Engineer for Department of Public Works. 15,000 equates to approximately 5 intersections where you have crosswalks and stop bars and so forth. So that's how I can gauge it.
Okay.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would say that, this is one of the first years that we've ever had standalone bicycle and pedestrian funding in the budget, and it's really exciting to see what that gets us, these 4 protected bikeways and then a significant amount of pedestrian improvements. So, I guess I would probably argue that I would argue that we should be spending more money on bicycle and pedestrian safety. But that is a great first start to have this standalone funds for the first time, thanks to the leadership of our chair and the mayor's office. So I mean, it seems appropriate to me to take the funding from that source. But, $15,000 is such a small portion of our overall public works budget. I think it's a huge benefit for the amount of money that we're spending. I was actually involved many years ago when this used to be a regional event, and it was really challenging to bring together all the different partners. And I really don't think the city got the benefit that we are getting from having our own standalone event. So I'm very supportive of this going forward.
Yeah, and I would say broadly speaking, my expectations that we would get, the amount of coverage that we had from standard markings and the additional that we would get above and beyond for the durable markings would still be roughly consistent with our goals. It's kind of the double the amount of standard and double the amount of enhanced markings. So if we can come out of the gate close to that, then I'll be pretty satisfied. However, it is kind of a notion that we should be prepared to think about our event and educational, kind of our soft activities versus the hard infrastructure activities, kind of pre-budget cycle.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't mean to offend anybody. I mean, I just wanted to say that, $15,000 in the grand scheme of things is, peanuts basically. But, the point is that, everybody who is anybody out there who wants to put on events, if there's an open process for that and it allows for them to have that open process, they would love the $15,000 from us. I mean, I'm sure there are thousands of groups in Minneapolis who would love $15,000 from us. And, $15,000 over the course of 1,000 different groups would, go a long way basically. And so, I think, if anything, if we have a process that allows for fairness in terms of us doling out that money, that would be nice. And that was just my point. Nothing against Bicycle Week. I've participated in the past. I think it's a great event. But, I think in some ways, I just want to be mindful of the fact that, if we have money available for folks, and we should let folks know that money's available. And, it should be maybe a competitive process for people to get the money instead of, the other way around, which is, in some ways, folks are a little bit more connected, get a little bit more of the piece of the pie than other folks. And, I get the argument about $15,000 being peanuts, but for most regular people out there, $15,000 is $15,000. It's not peanuts.
Councilmember, I concur most strongly. It's not just the dollars or the purpose, both of which, you could say small dollars, great purpose, but how we do things is rather important. And I concur most strongly that we would want this to be an exceptional process, not a normal process. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just need to go on record saying I have serious reservations about this, about taking money out of a durable markings budget for an event. That said, I'm a supporter of Bike Week, and I do think that, or rather I know that we have great partners in the people that put on these kinds of events, and I know that education is a big part of when we've set up this infrastructure, better bike infrastructure, that we need that component of education to go along with it. I do wish that it wasn't being taken out of the durable markings budget. I don't have a better suggestion, but I do want to say that's not what I voted on when I voted to put this money in the durable markings budget during the last budget year. So I do hope that perhaps in our next budget cycle, we can clearly delineate what amount of money should be used for education in these kinds of events, and then we can make it available to our partners and that sort of thing. So I just needed to lay it out there like that. Thanks.
Duly noted, Councilmember. Thank you for those comments. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think these are great points. I would just note that this function does come out of our adopted city transportation policy. So as Councilmember Palmisano noted, that the city has adopted policies that talk about the importance of education, both for walking and bicycling. And there's really always more that we could be doing. But, so I think it's a little bit different than saying, we have a fund for community events. This is really being driven by our transportation goals, our goals of opening up transportation options to more people, of encouraging people to use transportation options to reduce wear and tear on our city's roads. And so, it's really been driven by our adopted goals and policies rather than just, any kind of event that may come from the community. But I think the budget process questions are very valid. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that item? And then I'll move to the last item that was pulled from consent, and that's item 14, Open Streets 2015. And I'm not sure which council member wants the floor. Councilmember Bender or Councilmember Paulson? Okay. Oh, yeah. All those in favor of approving item 13, which is an authorization of $15,000 for the 2015 bike week by reallocating funds from the traffic program budget. What's that? Oh, we didn't vote on any of the others. All right, I'm just going to take them all as a slate, Councilmember Palmisano. So item 14, Open Streets 2015. Councilmember Palmisano, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is similar, although quite a bit, number of magnitudes more money than some of my concerns about Bike Week. I appreciate the amount of detail in our packets. It's a spreadsheet, and it shows where some of the money to support Open Streets events are coming from. And this is another event that I know that it got put into our budget last year without a dollar figure allocation. And I love Open Streets for that same reason of them being good educational events. They're also events that bring the streets together with our community. But I have concerns when I see the final figure and I see that it's nearly $200,000 about some of the different reports that have signed off on this. There's a small amount that is roughly $10,000 that looks like we'll be providing that to Open Streets in the way of food permits. I've been working very hard with our parks system because they are beginning to incur a cost on food inspection and food permits of almost the same amount of money. And I don't understand why that is, that's something that we can just give without any cost to this event. It certainly does incur some cost, yet I'm working very hard with our parks to be able to do these events throughout the year that they're starting to incur incremental food permit costs. The biggest fees of this are more on maybe the public safety front and the traffic control front. And so I'm just wondering, this is an event that was over budget last year by $30,000. Is there any, from the public safety end, for example, will there be overtime pay associated with this event or just regular pay? I also saw in the Open Streets events, I have some questions similar to Council Vice President Glidden had, but the other one is how were they selected? I know some of these have happened year over year, and in a way that's a great thing. In another way, should we be bringing them out to other streets for other opportunities and events? So I'm struggling with this. Should they be funded this way? Do we need all 8? I know that in casual conversation yesterday, I understand that there's an organization that might be interested in funding one of them. So that would be great. And if so, then can this budget be reduced by that amount of money? Should we do another one instead? So I just have some questions with whom would be the right staff person to.
Yeah, I think you bring up good points. And again, this is a process we're trying to normalize. The fact that we even have a spreadsheet broken down by department and sources and uses is a new thing. Staff has been working rather diligently to create a more standardized framework for these events. I think the point is that even though we value these events, quite immensely, and that was certainly the commentary during the budget cycle by almost every council member who's experienced these events, there's a strong desire to continue them. But yeah, your points are right in terms of creating a structure that's consistent with our other events, both budgetarily, process-wise, and then in terms of the community engagement aspects of it as well. I will yield your other questions to Director Hamilton.
Chair Reich and Councilmember Palmisano, if there are interested parties in funding the events, obviously we would talk with those folks and we would continue to have those conversations. At this point, I know there is some urgency to getting the events and the dates and everything finalized because there is a lot of logistics that goes into putting these events on. So I know that the Minneapolis Bicycle Coalition, they're very interested in knowing where they're headed for the season. I don't think that means the conversation stops at this point. I think we can continue to have conversations. If there's sponsors willing to step up, we would welcome that. Obviously, we would welcome that. So I guess I would offer that city staff are more than willing to continue the conversations to refine the program as the season goes on, but we do recognize that there's a need to have some finalization so that the planning can take place.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Ms. Hamilton, do you know how are these sites selected?
I know they were proposed by the Minneapolis Bicycle Coalition, and then they went to there's a committee, an events committee, that reviews all the locations, and there's been an extensive amount of conversation about which routes were viable and which locations were viable and under what conditions would this take place. And I know we have an array of staff of all the involved staff from across the city who've been involved, both police and traffic control and public works staff and traffic staff and business licensing. And I see there's many of them out in the audience who could address any specific questions there are, but there's been a very extensive process that has gone on over the past couple of months to try and come up with the best locations and the best dates that are going to work as well as they can.
If I may also, one of the highest amounts of money here is from the public works budget. It says traffic control signals, and it's $57,000. Is that something that we can take care of internally, or is that something that we will pay a vendor to do?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Palmisano, that is something we have to pay a vendor to do. We have a traffic control sign vendor, and so when we do road close signs and traffic detour signs, we have to pay a bill to a vendor to put those signs in place.
If one last question, Mr. Chair, I'm curious from the police standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, is this something that's done within regular pay, or is this an overtime pay kind of situation?
Morning, Chair and Committee. On behalf of the Police Department, I'm Sergeant Patty Holland, and I've been working with this committee for the last, since we started with this program. The staffing for this is going to be overtime. We bring in, because of the number of calls, our staffing during the summer months with all the other activities, just the increase in calls. We don't have the on-duty staff to staff this to the number that they need. So we will be bringing in our BERT team, which is our bicycle response team officers. So they will be on bikes, but it will be on overtime for their staffing. So that's where we come up with the dollar amount.
Thank you, Sergeant Helen.
Thank you. I appreciate your work trying to create a framework for this. So
Anything else that you need on the
Councilmember Yang,
Yeah, go ahead.
followed by
Yeah.
Councilman Sano.
public safety part of it?
Sergeant Helen, quick question. With regards to the Open Streets 2015 budget, it says $32,811.60. Is that, and you said that's all overtime, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is there any reason for it being, or the amount going above $32,811.60?
I'm sorry.
Is there any reason for the amount to go above the $32,000?
It could. It depends. Again, it's a climate type thing. So if there's all of a sudden we are starting to see an increase in crime or something like that, where the officers, a precinct is starting to have more calls than normal, where they have to hire on additional officers. I believe you got our organization, our spreadsheet where I've got it listed. I've actually added, and I will take the Lake Street one for example. We have 12 BERT officers, and then I've added 4 additional officers, just as MPD. They'll be actually just 911 responders, because we're literally dividing the 3rd precinct in half. And with taking all that traffic off of Lake Street, now pushing it all into the neighborhoods, it's going to impact our response time. And we did a call analysis on it, and over the last 3 years, during that same weekend, during that time, there's over 282 calls in the 3rd precinct that the 911 responders, and that's just police, that's not EMS, and that's not fire. So we will be adding additional staff just to handle the calls, just because we're dividing the precinct in half, and we're not going to have the ability to get across that event safely or quickly enough to respond to those calls.
So the $32,000, I mean, that's
going to be roughly right about, it should be on par. Yep.
Okay, because, I have to tell you, Assistant Chief Matt Clark actually sent us an email not too long ago, and his estimate was $50,000.
Yep.
So how do we reconcile the two numbers?
After talking to Deputy Chief, or Assistant Chief Clerk, we refined our numbers. We cut back on the staffing that we had originally assigned to these events, and actually cut it almost in half. So the number of bodies that we actually have working these events now are probably half of what we had originally scheduled. So.
Okay. And, when MPD makes a commitment to putting these sorts of services or these sorts of resources into an event, I mean, are there criteria that MPD goes through to say, okay, now we're going to commit this amount of resource to this event? Because, there are a lot of good events in the city, and sometimes, we make people pay for these events. And so
Yes.
why in this situation is this a unique situation?
Again, it depends on the actual event and what kind of involvement there is. We kind of have a ratio of 1 officer per 1,000 people when there's no alcohol, or it's 2 per 1,000 if there's alcohol being served. And then it also goes by the number of people attending the event, and then the length of the event. East Lake Street, you're going from Elliott down to 42nd, and I don't know the actual linear mileage on that, but it's a substantial amount of space. And for coverage, we have 12 officers work in that area for that particular event. So if I take the zombie crawl, we have over 90 officers working the zombie crawl, and that's all condensed in one area. But again, it's the climate of the event, so there isn't an actual formula that you can sit there and say, we'll do this for this one and this for this one. It all depends on the event itself. So.
Councilmember Glidden? No? Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great discussion. The way I think about open streets is that it is the one day or part of a day out of the year that people are able to use the street. And the costs that we're looking at are very minimal compared to the amount of money that we spend every day throughout the year subsidizing people to drive. And driving is an important part of our transportation system, and that's why we spend the money to do it. But these are the days where we say, you know what, this is a time where we're going to, for a very small part of the year, for only one part of the day, we're going to shut down very short segments of streets. I mean, compared to other cities that do, miles and miles and miles of streets every Sunday, for example, we're really kind of tiptoeing still into the ciclovia, the open streets movement here in Minneapolis. We're saying we're going to put some of those funds that we spend subsidizing our transportation system, which again is significant, many multiples this amount of money, to really focus on providing space for people to walk and bike and enjoy their community. And these events are transformative, not only from a transportation perspective, but from a community perspective, again, because we are taking that public space, that publicly built and subsidized space, and allowing it for a short period of time to be really used for the community and for people, instead of turning it over for cars. So I think I would challenge us to think about what is the percentage, of this amount of money, that we're using, again, to spend for people to drive every day.
Councilmember Glidden?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate, the discussion too. It's good for us to kind of delve in and understand a little bit more what we're talking about. But I'll say one thing that is a bit different here when you compare to other events is the city is a formal partner in this event, which really puts it in a bit of a different category. And I will say too, I think this is for us to continue to discuss, but there are a lot of benefits that flow to the city from these events that then need to be balanced with the costs. For example, with the police department, this is an incredibly beneficial event for the police department in terms of just positive, happy interactions with residents that might not otherwise get that opportunity to have kind of a one-on-one or an opportunity to talk with an officer. And that's just one of the benefits that I think flows from this kind of an event, which is quite unique. I don't remember, the other thing that we do that's kind of similar, of course, is National Night Out. And I don't remember that we've ever had a real detailed discussion of what's the cost to the city for National Night Out. But just another example of how we value events that have a formal city partnership, or of course National Night Out is the city sponsoring that, and what are the benefits that then flow from that, and are they worth the costs? And so I think, to me, this is part of this discussion. Clearly, this was a unanimously approved direction at the budget because these are enormously popular, sought-after community events. And it seems as though throughout the city, we're hearing more and more requests for these events because of the uniqueness, the ability to bring people together, and just all these other factors that come from the unusualness of closing down what usually is a place for cars and buses and all of that, and allowing pedestrians to interact in a unique and unusual way. So in that space. So good conversation. I'm sure we'll continue it at budget time, and thanks for the time allowed for this, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councilmember. And, I'll say the benefits are somewhat undisputed. I think if it's worth doing right. And I really appreciate staff endeavoring to create some structure around this, some budgetary transparency. I would just caution us, next budget cycle, we put numbers to our directives and not just open-ended. I think that would be very helpful too. But again, the more work we do on the front end, the less we have to do on the back end. And my goal is to make sure that we have a really good process for next year. And a very good conversation that's numerically quantified during the budget cycle. With that, I will treat all the items that we've discussed anew as consent items. Unless someone wants to sequentially pull something, I'm going to move 6, 12, 13, and 14 as stated and discussed. Any discussion? Any discussion? Councilmember Palmisano.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to abstain for the time being on item number 14.
Okay.
I'll hope to get comfortable with it by time of council.
Okay, noting that abstention. Any further discussion? All in favor of the items as discussed, say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. And we'll note the abstention from Councilmember Palmisano on item 14. Very good. Now we can move into the remainder of our agenda, and that includes a public hearing. And the public hearing is a continuance of a public hearing from March 3rd. And that regards the 2nd Street North, 21st, 30th, 33rd Avenue North, 42nd Avenue South, Bloomington Avenue South, and Minnesota 62 Frontage Road, street resurfacing project.
Mr. Chair, Mike Kennedy will make the presentation.
Okay. Morning, Mr. Kennedy.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We are here for the continued hearing on the stated resurfacing project. On January 30th, the City Council designated the locations, streets, and improvements proposed to be made in the 2nd Street, 30th and 33rd Avenues, 42nd Avenue, and Bloomington South and 62 Frontage Road neighborhoods. On March 20th, 2015, the City Council amended the project designation by deleting a segment of 2nd Street North from 24th Avenue to 26th Avenue. The revised cost, we also adjusted the rates because of some previous work, utility work that had been done. The revised cost estimate for this project is $1,485,830, reduced from $1,661,692 due to the removal of part of 2nd Street North. This is all financed by net debt bonds and special assessments. The project locations are as enumerated in your letter, and also I tried to get a map of all 3 of them up on the overhead at one time. I don't know if I was successful. It looks like I wasn't successful. The main one to talk about here is 2nd Street North. On March 3rd, 2015, the Transportation and Public Works Committee recommended that City Council amend the designation resolution to remove 2nd Street North between 24th Avenue to 26th Avenue from the resurfacing project. That part had been completely restored due to a center point beltline pipeline upgrade project, and a significant a portion of some of the rest of the project was partially done as well. So for all but 2nd Street North, the street resurfacing, all except the 2nd Street North part of the project, the street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2015 uniform assessment rates to the land area and benefited parcels located within the street influence zones along the improved streets. The approved 2015 resurfacing rates are 62 cents per square foot for non-residential and 21 cents per square foot for residential. For the 2nd Street North, Plymouth to Washington, except 24th to 26th Avenue, Partial resurfacing work will be completed because of the restoration from the Centerpoint Beltline project. And the assessments are based on a proportion of the uniform assessment rates that is equal to the percentage of the roadway surface that will be resurfaced. The adjustment rate, it was reduced by 17%, so the new adjustment is 83% of the 2015 uniform assessment rate, which is now 51 cents per square foot for non-residential and 17 cents per square foot for residential. There were questions last time about two things. One about the commercial versus non-commercial. It does take more to build a road and to maintain a road in an industrial commercial area or non-residential area. That's why the difference between the two rates here are residential and our non-residential rates. And also there's questions on about how to apply the adjustment. Remember that we are already talking about a uniform assessment rate that's averaged across these projects, so everybody pays the same rate in a given year. So it only made sense, rather than trying to pick out each individual parcel's amount that's resurfaced, to apply the resurfacing adjustment in an averaged way or a uniform way across as well. So the revised proposed total assessment amount is $1,162,624.93, reduced from $1,477,026.67 due to the removals and adjustments. So our recommendation today, well, let me also add that on February 13th, 2015, notice of the continued public hearing with revised assessments were mailed to property owners on March 10th, 2015 for the 2nd Street North project. So most of the residents or commercial business owners there had received a notice of the adjusted rates. So our recommendation today is to pass a resolution ordering the city engineer to proceed and do the work and adopt special assessments in the amount of $1,162,624.83 for the 2nd Street North, 21st, 30th and 33rd Avenue North, and 42nd Avenue North, and Bloomington in the 62 Frontage Road project, and pass a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation to authorize the city to issue and sell assessment bonds in the corresponding amounts for this project. That's my presentation. It has a lot of numbers in it that I got mostly out, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take any.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions per the presentation? Seeing none, this is a continuance of the public hearing, and I will reopen the public hearing for the project as described. No one has signed up. Does anyone wish to speak to this matter? Anyone wish to speak to this matter? Seeing no one coming forward to speak to this matter, I will close the public hearing, and I will move approval of the project as described in the presentation. And Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Public Works for being really flexible and mindful of the changes on 2nd Street North and essentially exempt 24th through 26th, and also to be mindful about the work that was done the previous year, I believe from Centerpoint or Excel and Centerpoint. Sometimes, these projects happen, and, I think our citizens think that we're not thoughtful, we're not mindful, we're not flexible about changing things if the conditions have changed. And in the situation, I thought Public Works did a fantastic job of going out and looking at pretty much every part of 2nd Street North to really figure out what's been done and to lower some of the assessments as recommended. And so I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, I appreciate the committee for continuing this public hearing. I'm guessing since nobody showed up, they were happy about, paying 51 cents and paying 51 cents instead of 62 cents, the commercial folks, and the residential 17 cents instead of 21 cents. That makes a huge difference. And so just wanted to thank everyone for doing a fantastic job of at least, looking at 2nd Street North and figuring out how best to approach this and to move along. So I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for those comments and your involvement, Councilmember, and of course, thank you to staff and demonstrating how thoughtful Public Works is with our road projects and flexible when we have some citizen input that we can work with. So with that, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor of the item before us, say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That is concluded. We'll now go to the latter part of our agenda. starting with a discussion item, which is discussion item 16, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee 2014 Annual Report.
Mr. Chair, Matthew Deardahl, our Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator, will introduce this item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Again, my name is Matthew Deardahl, and I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator for the city. I've been here about a month now, and I just want to note that the reception has been very positive, both from council members, public works staff, and then the committees, both the BAC and the PAC. So it's been a lot of fun so far, and I really enjoy being your new bike ped coordinator. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce this topic, which is the update of the 2014 update of both the BAC and the PAC. I wanted to note that we thought collaboration as a theme was really important, so we have the presentations together. Hopefully we can have discussion questions at the end after both of the reports. So we worked in plenty of time for the discussion questions. I think that the volunteers that advise our city are so important to making our city bikeable and walkable. And I've had the opportunity to attend both the BAC and the PAC, and the members on both committees are very passionate about these issues. And the time commitment is not insignificant, so I really appreciate their time and look forward to getting up to speed very quickly so I can help do even better work in 2015 and beyond. With that, we will first hear from Julia Tabbitt and Scott Engel from the PAC, and then after that, we'll hear from Nick Mason and Janice Gebner from the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Our chair of the BAC, Kathleen Mayall, couldn't make it, but we do have the vice chair and the chair and vice chair of the other committee. With that, we'll BAC.
Good morning.
Hello. So as he said, I'm Julia Tabbitt. I'm the vice chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And the Pedestrian Advisory Committee is essentially a group of city-appointed volunteers. There are 15 voting members polled roughly by geography from various parts of the city, and 12 non-voting members who represent different relevant agencies, city and regional agencies that kind of help keep us in the loop about what's going on. We attend up to 3 official committee meetings every month and do additional projects beyond that, writing resolutions, meeting with people, preparing for things like this. And it is, as Matthew said, pretty time intensive, but we really care about it a lot. The mission, essentially, the gist of it, is to improve the pedestrian experience in Minneapolis and to get more people out there walking. We focus primarily on safety all the time and secondarily on the pleasure of walking and freedom of movement. We comment on specific projects, and we also comment on policies more generally. So some of our this map you can see shows some of the projects that we commented on over the last year. They range a lot from really site-specific projects like the Target Center renovations that are coming up, neighborhood-focused projects like the stretch of Cedar Avenue that runs through the West Bank, and really large-scale kind of community overhauls like the Nicollet Mall renovations. Our perennial policy issues that we talk about a lot are pictured here. So snow clearance is always a really big focus of ours, and crosswalk markings is also a frequent focus. We also touched on things this year like the mayor's budget, surface lot enforcement, and outdoor business displays. And Scott can talk a little bit more about what we are looking toward for the future, if you want to step up a bit.
Council members, I'm Scott Engel. I live in the 12th Ward. I am the chair of the Programs and Policies Subcommittee of the PAC. This coming year and into the future, we're looking to keep working on issues. Julia mentioned the snow and ice clearance. We made some real progress this year with your help and the mayor's help, prioritizing corner clearance on the priority pedestrian corridors. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it didn't snow that much, so we maybe didn't get a lot of experience from that, but I think the policy is there for future winters where we will have lots of snow. The next item is crosswalk markings. I think this is a perennial problem, and I think it is a budget item that needs to be looked at. The results of our crosswalk marking, there's just not enough money to do it in an effective way. If you go outside now, there are basically no markings anywhere. 1% of our markings in the city are durable, meaning they last more than like 2 months or something, because we're using latex paint. It is just not durable. And the other problem is it cannot be applied until it is warm. And last year it didn't warm up till almost June. So Public Works didn't start doing their crosswalk markings until June, and they completed them in like November. Well, why are we painting crosswalk markings in November? So we're going to be coming to you seeking more funding to do the latex paint, doing it earlier and more often because it wears off so quickly, and also more durable markings. So 1% is not a lot. So, and the final piece about this is we've learned this year that the city actually does crosswalk markings on Hennepin County roads, which are the most dangerous streets in our city. However, through the agreement, Hennepin County doesn't provide any funding to the city to do the crosswalk markings. So whatever the city budgets is what gets done on all the streets. And it doesn't seem fair, and it's not enough funding. So next item is sidewalk gaps. In the 2009 pedestrian master plan, there were 900 and some sidewalk gaps identified in the city. Almost none of them have been filled in the last few years. I think part of it is because there are 900 of them and it's hard to focus. So we have been making an effort, and you're going to see a map soon that prioritizes around 15 locations in the city that have sidewalk gaps. These are located on priority pedestrian corridors. Many of you will recognize them. There are 4 of them along cemeteries, but they're on bus routes and there where people walk and there's no sidewalk. It's silly. They're along parks where people do walk, but they can't walk along the street. It's silly. There are other places that we have no idea why there's no sidewalk. And they should be filled. And a funding source needs to be identified, whether it's a CIP or some sort of assessment to the property owners or whatever, to get these gaps filled. The city and the county and the state have allocated tens of millions of dollars in the last 10 years to fill bicycle gaps in the bicycle network. And we have 15 or so gaps in the sidewalk network that should be filled as well. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is Walk Week. In the last few years, Walk Week has disappeared. There used to be a Bike and Walk Week. Last year, for the first time, it was Bike Week. And so the Pedestrian Advisory Committee is working with no funding with different jurisdictions in the city. So we're going to tag on with Minneapolis Public Schools, which already organizes several walk events throughout the year. And we're looking to the first week of October during International Walk to School Day. It's the first Wednesday in October. And so we're working with the health department, CPED. They might do like a walk and talk thing with policymakers here in downtown, talking about the public realm thing, highlighting public safety. And, if it's a walk week or it's a walk day or something, we haven't determined it yet, but we think walking should be given a higher priority in the whole scheme of things. So that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janice Gepner. I'm the secretary of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. We have a couple of members here. I'll speak for just a couple of minutes, and then Nick Mason, our chair, will take over. And our Vice President, Paul Friends, is here, right here. And I'm a park board. I've been appointed to the BAC from the park board citizens rep. So I just have a couple slides. So this is our, I won't talk, I think we've already presented to you about our membership. It's similar to the PAC. So the role of the Bicycle Advisory Committee is to promote bicycling both as a viable mode of transportation, but also for recreation. So to support all modes of bicycling, to advocate for bicycle infrastructure improvements, to encourage safe riding, and to involve people interested in bicycling issues throughout the city. The BAC functions as an advisory committee, primarily to the mayor and the city council and the park board, as well as functioning as a liaison to people who bike, businesses, neighborhoods, and other community agencies. And I should say we actually sort of function as a bicycle advisory committee to many different constituencies. We have had presentations from MnDOT. We work closely with Hennepin County. We have provided representatives to the park board's community advisory committees, and neighborhood groups who want to support bicycling have come to speak with us, as well as citizens who are interested in bicycling issues. So this is just, here are some project recommendations we've made in the past year. We've made recommendations on more than 24 projects just in the city, just in 2014. And this is just a short list of a few of the projects we've advised on. I should say that we work closely with public works staff to make recommendations on roads that are scheduled for resurfacing. So most of the projects we advise on are what we call opportunity projects, roads that are going to be resurfaced anyway. And so to minimize costs, just that's the most cost-effective time to add a bike facility. And for most of these projects, we've had staff meet with us multiple times, like 2 or 3 or more times. So when a project's first being outlined, we might meet with them initially to present some ideas on the project, and then as the designs develop, public staff usually come back to us and we make other suggestions. And some of the projects that we've made suggestions, and this map I think shows many of the projects we've made recommendations on in the last year. So some of the projects in the last year we've commented on would be the new protected bike lane on 36th Street, improved access to the Midtown Greenway with the 35W access project, defined space, and we've asked for a defined safe space to separate bikes and pedestrians as part of the Hennepin-Lyndale project. We've asked for, but not gotten, dedicated bike lanes on Penn Avenue North. And we've also been involved in helping with regional solicitation for federal transportation funding. We make recommendations and support. And of course, we've also been involved in discussing winter maintenance along with the PAC. So with that, I will turn over to our chair, Nick Mason.
Thanks, Janice. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's an honor to be here today. My name is Nick Mason. I'm the Ward 12 representative of the BAC, and I chair the committee as well. I do want to hit the last project recommendation because I think it's important. I've been a member of the committee for more than a decade now, and it's really exciting to look at our street maintenance program, looking at our bicycle master plan that we have, and decide what fits in, what's getting done next year, and let's get that stuff done when we're already repaving and reconstructing so we can do it as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. And that was a big step forward this year. We also did policy recommendations in a number of different areas. The first one is really addressing the issue that in Minneapolis and in other communities around Minnesota, the demand for bike pedestrian projects in addition to all road projects is greatly underfunded, and we're hopeful again this year that we see an increase for funding to do more projects with the state. We also supported the Met Council's Regional Bicycle System Study, which was the first really comprehensive look at Minneapolis and surrounding communities in the metro to make sure that people who live here and work here can get around and have those connections, because we have a great bicycle master plan. Some of our neighbors maybe don't have quite as good of a plan, and we want to make sure that as things are happening, we have great connections so there is mobility within and throughout all of those connections. I'm really happy to announce that last week, the city of St. Paul caught up with Minneapolis, 5 years now it only took, and passed their first comprehensive bike plan, which is an outstanding plan, passed the council unanimously. And our committee reviewed that last year and made sure that the connections between the two cities was as good as it could be, and we put those into our recommendations. We also supported to begin funding the adopted city goal of 30 new protected bikeways. We're excited to have work begin on that in 2015. We also supported Minneapolis Bike Week last year, which is an event that has been an evolution for more than 2 decades, to my knowledge. That used to just be Bike to Work Day, became a week, a bike walk week regionally when we got the non-motorized transportation pilot project, and of course that money went away. And fortunately, we were able to keep that event and keep that momentum and have the most successful event ever with 11,000 direct participants last year, more than ever before. Very successful there. And we even had council members ride, which you can see in the picture there, and not always on the most protected facilities, or on maybe the nicest day, but we were all there, and we had a great time. And lastly, we're also playing catch up with some other neighbors, so very happy to announce we do have a great bicycle cost share program for bike parking. It's been around for a long time, and we spent several years piloting and figuring out an on-street bicycle corral program. So that was completed last year, and hopefully in a couple years, we'll be like Portland, Oregon, and have a list of 30 businesses who are waiting to get their own stall like the one shown here. As I mentioned, I've been with the committee for a long time, and I'm really excited. We've got a lot of talented individuals on the committee, and we had leadership facilitate a strategic work planning session for the work of this committee when new membership started, and we began our work in summer of last year. We spent several months working on this, and it is across the 6 E's. These are the E's that are represented comprehensively in our bicycle master plan, and I've highlighted a couple of them here. They're all in the report. The first one under engineering is no surprise. We want to plan and build a network of protected bike lanes. We hope that one day we can have a great system that gets people comfortable and helps meet our city's mode share goals of getting more people on bikes. No surprise, and again, like Scott, I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse that we didn't get a lot of snow this year, but the winter maintenance looked pretty good this season. But we want to continue to improve that, in particular on street, and I want to highlight we have a huge opportunity coming to the city. Minneapolis and St. Paul will be the first U.S. host to the International Winter Cycling Congress next year, so we will have 400 people from dozens of countries all over the world. We thankfully beat out Madison to get it, but we also beat out Moscow. So this is a far-reaching conference to showcase our successes, and we also have time to work on those challenges, and we hope that we can plan and fund that well. We plan on looking at it. For education, we don't do a lot, as was highlighted in earlier discussion. We don't do a lot with education. We think the bang for the buck there is working with our public schools and creating a curriculum and using that. It's already underway. We have some great staff at Minneapolis Public Schools who are doing that work. We want to work with them and increase successes like International Walk and Bike to School Day last year and Bike to School Day, which in the last year saw more than 9,000 kids participate on those single days and a lot more riding every day. We also hope to look at a distribution model for education that is with civic leaders, corporations, neighborhood organizations, so that we can get the word out that bicycles belong on our streets and that there are rules and everyone follows those rules, and that's how we can be safe together. Equity is something that our bicycle master plan addresses maybe better than many others out there. Unfortunately, that's not saying much. The committee is really, truly interested in addressing equity head-on and expanding that definition to include geography, race, age, gender, income, culture, and ability, and to make sure that that is a part of all of our work, all of our projects, and everything that we do. And we believe that starting that off, kicking that off in 2015 can be finally completing our Complete Streets policy work that has been ongoing for a number of years now, and to make sure that that final plan addresses equity. We've had a number of different levels of support from MPD over the years, and I'm proud to say that last year was our best year ever. We had a number of discussions with Inspector Rondo, and we have a great new representative, Sergeant Campbell from the 1st Precinct, and we've been looking at data, talking about our joint expertise and how we can work together to increase enforcement opportunities. One exciting one is there is Towards Zero Deaths funding that funds 1 day a year to actually target bicycle pedestrian infractions on both sides. and they have been doing this for a number of years now, and we're going to work with them on a media partnership so that that can actually reach thousands of people and learning what the rules are as opposed to just a few that are targeted that day. The second one goes back to equity. Well, we are hearing a disturbing number of reports of bicyclists being harassed by motorists on the roadway. It does not make them feel safe, and we're looking at ways that we can improve that. Under encouragement, again, we don't do a lot of encouragement opportunities. The City Open Streets is definitely our shining example of that, and we want to look at other opportunities, particularly in the workplace. We have Fortune 500 and 100 companies, in addition to dozens of other nationally recognized bike-friendly businesses in the community. We can use those as tools for education, and we also believe encouragement in year-round cycling. This is something that we have the opportunity. There's a lot of things that if we work hard, we can do as well as other American cities. We can do winter cycling better than any other city, and I think we should. Lastly, evaluation is our most important. We want to continue to review our existing metrics, investing in new counting technologies, and continuing to administer user surveys. We've done a great job with our benchmarks, and we need to continue to use good data to drive our priorities. And I just want to highlight one example and recognize City Staff Simon Valensky, who's here in the room, who did a crash analysis, and with that was able to apply for bicycle funding for the state's Highway Safety Improvement Program dollars. Traditionally, those funds have gone to speed, drinking, and seatbelts, and they have never gone to bicycling. Minneapolis will be the first recipient of that project, thanks to that great data collection. And lastly, Minneapolis has a gold level national bike-friendly community recognition, and that also encompasses the 6 E's that are highlighted here. That expires this year. We're going to work hard with our new coordinator to upgrade that to platinum. That's going to take a fair amount of work, but the committee is up for it. Lastly, I just want to say thanks. As has been stated, it is a big commitment. We have passionate members who just in regular committee meetings have met over 1,100 hours in 14. This does not include the task forces. This does not include the other work that's highlighted here. A couple of things that were extra fun that folks may not have known about is we got to do a ride with the police chief, which has not happened in my time in Minneapolis, and we had a great ride on the north side, giving helmets and talking to kids, and just making a statement about bicycling with MPD. And we also had members participate and talk to members of state legislators from all across America when they were here in August with the National Conference of State Legislators bike ride. And lastly, we're very happy to have a new partner with Matthew Deardahl, and we're enthusiastic to get to participate with the PAC in that hiring process, and we're excited for what's coming next. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I believe I forgot to note one of the most important things that I had intended to say, which is to acknowledge the work of Simon, McKinsey, and Forrest on our bike ped team. This past year has been a lot of transition for them, both with my position being vacant and then also kind of the shift in public works. And there's just a tremendous amount of work that's been done, and they've also been great answering my million questions that I've been asking them in this first month. So I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge their great work over the past year.
Certainly will echo that. Councilmember Yang? Oh, no. Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the work and the report and getting the update. And I had a couple of specific questions or maybe comments or things I wanted to highlight. The first had to do with the pedestrian report and the great map that you had of the missing sidewalks, and was able to articulate where there's only one on the side and then also where there are no sidewalks. And I'm just curious if you or anybody from Public Works has actually looked at what would the cost be involved in this. I know we had, I think, an alley. We've looked at what it would cost to complete our alley system and some of these other things. And I'd be very interested in looking at all those purple lines in the first ward. I think the chair of the committee might be very interested in seeing what would it cost and how could we actually do to complete that. So we looked at the cost of finishing our sidewalk plan.
We're still in process, actually. So I don't think anybody's really looked at this at all since the pedestrian master plan was created in 2009. So we have been, over the last few months, going through the list and trying to determine how to identify priorities. So we went ahead with our priority pedestrian corridors, and literally last night, we narrowed it down to about 15. We haven't gotten to the cost estimates, though in some cases it's relatively easy to figure out the cost of concrete and the length of the space. So other cases, it's a much more comprehensive reconstruction of the street, and I'm guessing they would be into the millions. Some of these would be as easy as $100,000 or something like that.
I appreciate that, and it seems like we could just estimate what a sidewalk costs at a certain length, and we could total up the length of all of this and think, well, if we created a fund with this many $1 million in it, or whatever, we could finish the plan. And I think it would be important to prioritize where we wanted to go first and what made sense, and look for opportunities and all of this. It would be very, we'd have to be thoughtful about it and elaborate. But I'd like to see us moving forward. And there may be some instances where we say, okay, we're not going to build a sidewalk on the other side of the street here for whatever reason. I don't know. But certainly your committee could play a big role in that. I'm also very interested in the permanent or more permanent treatments for our crosswalks. I think that's crucial and it's very important. And I'm also interested in better signalization and some kind of standards. I think it's been very hard for us if we want to, like, for example, put in a button and have a flashing light or even a red light. When we've done that, it's been rare, although you look at some suburban communities and they've definitely identified even some mid-block crossings, maybe near a school or something, and they have lots of treatments. I know that I saw one recently that actually the crosswalk lit up when somebody pushed the button at night, and you could see it from a great distance if you were driving. And I thought that was fantastic. So I'd love to see more work in those areas. I'm also concerned about some of our regular crosswalks where you can't get your walk sign unless you push a button. And so there's not an automatic opportunity to do that. And so the cars just seem to be getting the preference. And I think I've talked a lot about this before. I think when we're ranking our intersections, we have to look at when is it failing for cars. And we're really good at that. I think we have a grading system A to F for car failures, right, and successes. But when is it failing for bikes and pedestrians too? And I think we could use your advice of actually figuring out, are there instances where we should have that? I think people call it the beg button, or are there none that we should ever have for that? And if so, if we are going to have that requirement to improve traffic flow, what would we base that decision on in the first place? Maybe you've already taken a position never to have beg buttons for the pedestrians. I'm not sure.
We have discussed it actually just recently in a meeting. It's more complicated than you would think, partly because of the infrastructure that's built into the roadway. But I think as pedestrians, I think we feel that there were far too many of these beg buttons put in, especially by Hennepin County in the last few years. The city's policy now is to pretty much discourage them. So they're really not going in anymore, but there are a lot still out there and that are timed to, the infrastructure is built in, so into the road. So it would take significant resources to sort of retrofit some of these. So we're going to dig into it this year. That was something I failed to mention. We're going to dig into it at the Pedestrian Advisory Committee and talk about ways to, I don't know, even if you could shut them off, I don't know. But
I appreciate that. And I just had a couple other comments about the bike. Maybe one point that I wanted to make, one of the things I've seen that the city wasn't doing several years ago was to actually put in some separate signalization for bikes. I think the first place this happened was entering the campus from Dinkytown and Como, where there was actually a bike signal that got put in saying, and I'm not sure if they go the same time as the cars turning left, but anyway, bikes were given their own time to clear that intersection out. I think it's just been fantastic. I think all the drivers have figured it out and they've caught on to it. And I think when you have those kind of signalizations and you actually have our traffic laws working for bikes better, there's this greater tendency for them than to the bikers to stop at the next time when, and they realize, and kind of follow the laws, because the signalization is making sense for bikers, and it's different when we have a lot of intersections that don't really, and we require them to stop. So I would love to see kind of some exploration on how we would make a decision if we want to put in separate bike signalizations in the city. I'm also curious if there's been more implementation of those that you're aware of in recent years. I think I did see another instance of it, but now I'm only thinking of one in the city. Maybe Mr. Mason could respond.
Councilmember Gordon, members of the committee. There are a couple of them, and we are looking at more. Like was noted with the pedestrian, it's more complicated than we would like it to be, and we actually spent a whole meeting talking about different kinds of signalization treatments with technology that's out there. And for our understanding of the data, the most frustrating thing for bicyclists is, and I think this is probably not necessarily untrue for pedestrians, I don't want to speak for you guys, but it's not having the feedback if you've gotten anything, aside from the fact that I'm reminded every year when I go to DC that I'm ready to run across the street in Minneapolis, and I get the actual amount of time it should take me to cross. I know that's another problem too, but so bicyclists not knowing that if they've pushed a button, if they get feedback, but then it's also, there's lots of different treatments with different costs, and they have different levels of effectiveness as far as actually tripping sensors. And so I know that we talked about looking at some new technology, including thermal and radar, and the city is looking at evaluating some of those and figuring out how that fits into the picture.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming here and for all of the hours. I know firsthand, I used to serve on the BAC, how many hours everyone puts in. So thank you so much for all of your work and leadership. You know, I think this work is so important as we look at our mode share for biking and walking in Minneapolis. It's pretty good compared to other cities in the United States, but it's really peanuts compared to the potential that we have for people to walk and bicycle in our city. And again, that has a lot of implications. It has implications for our environment. It has implications for our transportation budget and the wear and tear on our roads, where we have decades of deferred maintenance that we're going to have to figure out how to pay for pretty soon. And so I think, you know, it's a really important part of our transportation system. And I have seen it over my time since I first joined the BAC in 2009. The conversation has evolved very quickly in that time, and I think it's because of the leadership that you are bringing. Just two things I wanted to highlight. Number one, I'm so happy to see the BAC and the PAC coordinating and working together whenever possible. One of the first projects that I remember happening with was the Washington Avenue reconstruction. And that was a project where, you know, in the past years, maybe the road would have been proposed and there may have been a choice between safe walking space or safe biking space. But we were able to get together and prioritize the fact that we wanted there to be a safe space for people to walk and bicycle on that roadway. And I think it was because of our collaboration as people who walk and people who bicycle that we were able to make sure that it was actually the road space, the traffic space that was taken away so that people could enjoy that road in a multimodal way, a complete street there. And then the second thing, I'm really glad to see the complete streets policy highlighted. I think it is really important for us to get a complete streets policy done as soon as possible. I was hoping we could get it done this year. As we have restructured our transportation department, as we look at not designing the roadway from the inside out, you know, how many lanes do we need for traffic to move as fast as possible through our neighborhoods, but rather from the outside in, can we design streets that are complete in a true sense, that serve neighborhood commercial nodes, that make it safe for people of all ages and all abilities to walk and bicycle and travel along our roadways? I think the complete streets policy will help provide the policy guidance that we need to get into some of these details. How soon before our road reconstruction and resurfacing project schedule do we need to start planning for potential bicycle and pedestrian improvements, which the BAC and PAC have both done a great job along with staff of trying to do that more and more, but I think we should have that in policy. And then secondly, you know, the resources that we would need to really build out our bicycle gap map is compelling. I mean, we, you know, very few streets in our city have safe bicycling routes on them. And then pedestrian improvements, they tend to be more expensive in a lot of places, and they're really important. And so, how do we get to be more proactive in terms of building out our bicycle and pedestrian network and layering in both standalone projects as well as these opportunity projects? So I'm really enthusiastically supportive of us getting a complete streets policy adopted as soon as possible, and really thank you all for your work and leadership on that issue as well.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll just echo the thanks for all the work and hours are put into it. It's a very great and robust partnership that we have, and I think that the work that has been done and the direction that we have and the momentum that we have is very much credited to your efforts, and so we continue them. Of course, we like being ahead of Portland, but maybe we should catch up to Copenhagen. So, new goals, right? Okay, so with that, I will, since they were jointly presented, I will jointly move items 16 and 17, which were received in files with respective reports. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting and receiving and filing, say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting, nay. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, we move on to our next discussion item, which is our on-street parking mobile phone payment system.
Mr. Chair, our parking systems manager, Bill Szyminski, will make a presentation about this item.
Thank you.
Good morning, Councilmember Reich, committee members. Bill Szyminski, Parking Systems Manager, seeking authorization to execute a contract with Park Mobile for a mobile payment application system for metered parking. Now, we've been working with the Treasury staff from the Finance Department and legal to get the contract together, and I'll just hit some of the highlights of that contract, which include that the city will become and maintain the merchant of record. In other words, all the payments will come to the city, and then we would pay out to Park Mobile for their users' fees that they're entitled to. A few advantages to that is, one, we essentially control all the money, but we'll be paying them lower processing fees than they would normally charge if they were doing the processing. So the fees that we're going to incur for credit cards are essentially those that we're incurring right now if somebody walks up to the meter and uses their card at the meter. So before I get into, and one other thing, that the Park Mobile won't be getting paid by the city out of city funds. All of their profits and essentially their revenues will come from the user fees that we'll get into in a little bit here. But I wanted to kind of show you from the user's perspective what this would look like if you're actually using the system. Okay. First thing you do, we'll just take this from a mobile phone, a smartphone kind of approach. There's a couple of different ways of doing it, but these are sample screenshots. They're not actually developed yet for us. So these are kind of like what they'd look like. But you go download the app from Google Play or the iTunes Store. And once you get in there, you hit the sign up button, put in your personal information and your credit card or PayPal information. Once you pick your preferred payment method, then when you want to start parking, you go to the parking portion of the app, and in our case, we would put in the meter number. This is a sample from another town that actually uses zones and pay-by-plate enforcement, but it also shows the adaptability if we choose to make changes in our parking operations. So once you enter the meter number, then you go and tell it how far you want to park, how long in duration, whatever those increments are, and then it offers you the opportunity to confirm whatever transaction you're going to do before you hit the button, and it starts the clock. You get a countdown on your clock to when your parking will expire. So if you're able to up your parking time, say you're in a restaurant running a little longer than you wanted to, you could actually add increments from your table without going back out to the parking meter to pay more. So here's how it works. You can do this from your car, or the example of the restaurant. You open up the app either on a smartphone or on a tablet, or you can actually call in and do the payment electronically. It goes to the server, that big cylinder in the middle, that distributes the payment to us, then notifies the meter, and important to the process is enforcement as well. So it all goes electronically without you actually physically going to the meter to pay. Again, the fees for it are all based in Park Mobile's user fees. The city doesn't pay anything for it. All of the cost for the program is based in these user fees. Essentially two different sections. There's a preferred customer and the non-preferred customer. The preferred customer is essentially paying an extra $1 a month to get a lower fee. And then the bottom two sections of the wallet, that's essentially a deposit account where you can drop $20 into the account and go back to that wallet and draw the money from there rather than doing the credit card transaction each time. Advantage to the customer is a lower processing fee. Advantage to the city is that with a wallet, we only pay one transaction fee for a credit card. That's when you drop the 20 in rather than every time you pay the parking meter. So implementation, we hope to get started almost immediately. After we're okay to sign this thing, we'd get working on a geographic area, small area of about 500 spaces or so, and get a test area set up, work with enforcement, and again, back to finance to make sure the money's moving right, that enforcement's getting all the details, and that 500 is about, we have about 7,500 metered spaces in the city. So after we get that all firmed up, then we'd probably expand it like a miniature test of a full rollout, expand it out to a larger area, make sure that enforcement and again, finance are all getting the information that they need to before we implement it citywide. So that's essentially the plan. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for the presentation? Any questions? Councilor Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for staff. This won't change the ability, a person's ability to just pay with coins or with dollar bills at the point of service, correct?
Not at all.
So from an equity perspective, that's important. Not everybody has credit cards and the ability to use them. And then a few slides back, is there a Twitter bug there? Zone 9912, is that a Twitter bug? Is it the ability to tweet that your car is at a certain parking space?
I'm not really sure what that does. I tried installing the app, but I don't have any meters to test it with, so I didn't get that far. And I'll find out and we'll get back to you on that. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussion? Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
I think this is definitely a very welcome improvement to the system and a convenient for folks. And so with that, I will authorize execution of a 3-year contract with Park Mobile LLC with an option to extend the contract for up to 2 additional years for an on-street parking mobile payment system as described in the staff discussion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Dissenting nay, that carries. We'll go to our final item today, which is item 19, the Minneapolis Street Lighting Policy Revision.
Mr. Chair, John Worcester, our Director of Traffic and Parking Services, will present this new policy.
Good morning, council members. John Worcester, Director of Traffic and Parking Services, here to talk about the streetlight policy for you today. I have a presentation and some documentation to share with you, and with that, entertain questions at the end. To maybe start off, first a little recap of where we've been with the streetlight policy. We first adopted a streetlight policy in 2009. We took action in 2013 to update the policy related to basically 3 areas: funding, petitioning, and non-assessable properties. There were several subsets of actions related to that 2013 action. We've accomplished 2 of those, and we've got 2 more to go, and that's why we're here today. So the first 2 that we have accomplished is we did apply the funding mechanism changes to several projects, and those have moved forward and have been now completed. The second component of that is we have developed and implemented the capital program for the pedestrian corridors. So both of those have moved forward. What we're bringing forward today in 2015 is an update to the policy document itself. So a number of these things affected while we've been implementing these 2013 recommendations. We have not updated the document that's out there on the web, and so we're bringing that forward. Plus, we have more information today about the pedestrian corridor and how we're planning to spend those new capital dollars. So that's what we have for the committee today. To start with the policy, just kind of a further recap on what was in there. We have updated the document. The document is the one that's attached with the council letter and is on the overhead cover page in that regards. We've completely redone the document. There was a lot of clarity and understanding, and we shifted sections around in the document. So we're intending that the 2009 document be completely replaced with this 2015 document in that regards. The 2013 policy changes listed here are the components related to funding. So with reconstruction of projects on CBD and pedestrian corridors, the funding would be paid with the reconstruction of the project, and that's what we've been proceeding with over the last several years. Likewise, how we petition relative to those reconstruction processes was also changed in that context, and those things have been moved forward. There was also clarification about what non-assessable properties are, and for non-assessable properties, I'm talking about primarily governmental properties and how we count them towards the petitioning process, and a governmental property like a park or our property or a school would be counted as a yes vote in the petition process. And then we also clarified how we're dealing with projects that eventually hit an end of service life, and when does a life cycle of a streetlight project end. And so those were the 13 policy changes that were moved forward and have been incorporated into the document. In addition to that, we've identified these three other substantive changes to the 2015 document that are different. And the first one's more of a wordage component, and but we renamed the pedestrian priority corridors to pedestrian streetlight corridors. There's a lot of a generic use of the term pedestrian priority, and so we didn't want to confuse that in our intentions with street lighting over what may be other pedestrian priorities for a variety of reasons in the system. And so we've relabeled, the system, the corridors in that sense. We didn't change them in the map, and I'll get to the map here in a minute. The other component of this is that we've moved towards a new standard of installing LED fixtures out in the city. You will see some of those popping up, and we have been doing them with new reconstruction projects and new installations as we go forward. And then the last item, which is a change from what council had previously done in 2013, is related to private development. We've had a lot of success over the past years in encouraging and getting private developers to step up when they are impacting the public right-of-way, the street, sidewalk, curb area, and put in new street lighting. We've got most of developers doing that, but not all. And so we think for consistency and fairness, we should be obligating all to do that. And so when they touch these adjacent frontages to their property where lighting along the CBD and the pedestrian corridors are, we're going to require the developers to install lighting. So with that, those are the highlights of the policy document changes that we have today. And so as part of the action, we're requesting approval of that document. And I can pause now, or I can get into the funding program. I think I'll just go into the funding program and then seek comments in totality at the end. In the document, this kind of is a segue into the pedestrian priority corridors. This is the map that's in the policy document that lists and identifies the priority corridors that we have labeled as pedestrian streetlight corridors. And so we'll be talking about that and these corridors for the remainder of the presentation. And so we developed a capital program, and so what does the capital program entail? First of all, we included this in the 2014 budget, and now coming into 2015, we have approximately $1 million available to us to spend, and so we're have developed a program to spend those dollars in 2015. Likewise, there's additional money for the out years in the capital program, and we'll continue to propose dollars for that. Roughly, this is about a $500,000 a year program, which gets you to about 40 to 60 polls a year. Roughly, that equates to about 5 to 9 long blocks of that. But the key question here is these dollars have by no way can effectively hit all of these streets really quickly. And so we need a method on how we prioritize the lighting in spending those dollars. So what we started with initially was looking at our system, looking at our needs, and identifying the gaps. Basically, we've mapped all of our lights that are out on these corridors, and roughly 1/3 of them are meeting our lighting standards for pedestrian corridors. The other 2/3 are not. That doesn't mean they're not lit. It means they're not lit to the pedestrian standards. So most likely they have wood poles on the corridor rather than a higher level light quality out there. And so with that, we identified needs and gaps. So this graphic here indicates our superimposing of green dots on the red corridors being now the pedestrian corridors. And you can kind of see how we have identified where the lights are and how the standard is being met. So roughly 1/3, as I mentioned before, are lit. The 2/3 are not lit according to the standard. So we have 2/3 of the system with which to meet that. That's roughly, I think, about 120 miles. If we ballpark that, that's probably about $80 to $90 million worth to do it all to the standard in today's dollars. The next step in our process was to develop some criteria and apply it to these corridors in order to identify how we prioritize. We looked at 3 criteria: transportation criteria, and equity criteria, and other kind of considerations to factor in. With the transportation criteria, we looked at street typology that we got from the Access Minneapolis plan. We categorized streets accordingly based on land use and a number of other implications, and so that's the typology. We have our primary transit network. Where do we have higher frequency of transit and users and people on the street? We also have safety elements related to pedestrians and bicycle crash elements and facilities that we have out there. So we took all of those criteria and developed a point system with that, and I'll touch on that in a minute. The second criteria that we used was equity criteria. We looked at several of those. We kind of focused in on 3, one being crime statistics that we obtained from the police department. And those crime statistics, we tried to narrow the list down to things that happen relative to street crime rather than all types of crime. We also looked at racial and ethnic populations in that regard, and we looked at economic. And primarily our economic factor of data set is the areas of concentrated poverty mapping that we have in the city. And then the last criteria that we used is, are there other things that would influence where we put street lighting and how we should fund those? And so do we have other street construction projects going on? Are there other transportation-related projects or other development-related projects that are going on that we should combine with, avoid, schedule? And then logical project ends. We're trying to find reasonable start and end points so that we don't create worse conditions, I'll say, a little bit relative to large light, small light quantities out in the street. So with those criteria, we developed some conclusions from those 3 sets of criteria. The first 2 bullet points here really talk about the transportation criteria. As we saw in that initial graphic where we mapped the existing lights, the 1/3 of the system that's being met, that's mostly the highly ranked corridors when we look at the transportation criteria. Second of all, we said then with that, while we've hit the kind of the high level elements, we're really into the medium and low category usage areas relative to the transportation criteria. And so what do those look like, and how can we expect to focus on those? And this is a tough map to read, but this was our scoring system, and the darker red and orange colors are the higher ranked areas, and then it goes to yellow-green with the lower ranked areas based on our point system. And you can kind of see most of the red and orange has disappeared because we have subtracted those out because they're already lit according to that standard. So there are a few hotspots in there that we need to look at. But in totality, what it's telling us is that the transportation criteria is really in the medium category as it relates to being an element to how we can prioritize our corridors. In looking at the equity criteria, those three sets of data really focused on three planning areas: the near north, Camden, Phillips, and Powderhorn neighborhoods as being the areas that were hitting those criteria of crime, economic, and racial ethnic populations. And then lastly, we identified a conclusion that we want to continue to explore our partnerships with our other agencies or others, developers, et cetera, private sector, who can help us further leverage our resources to take the program forward. So with those conclusions, we looked at the system and the gaps that we had out there in the criteria, and we identified 4 locations where we would intend to spend the $1 million that we have in 2015. Here are the 4 locations identified on the list. I have a map following here, and maybe it'll be better to talk about those locations at the map. The map is really small, but on the north side, we have Plymouth Avenue right near Fremont and Emerson. For those familiar with that location, the Hennepin County just opened a social service center right there, and so that will be one of the elements nearby. There's actually a gap on Plymouth Avenue relative to lighting. Likewise, there's a gap right on Emerson and Fremont, and the county has expressed interest to help us participate with putting lighting in there. So that kind of segued really nicely together as things that they had interest in and we had interest in. Likewise, on the south side, we identified 2 projects, one on Chicago Avenue from nominally about 34th to 39th. It's a mix of high-frequency transit corridor, commercial, a little bit of residential, but also bus routes on 38th as well. And so we've got not only some work on lighting on Chicago, but also on 38th as those 2 bus routes intersect right there at 38th in Chicago. And then the last of the 4 locations is on Bloomington. The Bloomington bus route is a little bit higher, but we also have a crime concentration area around the 25th Street location, and so we're lighting up a portion of Bloomington in that location. We are working towards next steps. So what do we do beyond 2015 in that regards? And so we're going to be moving forward with location and design review for these 4 projects. We will expect to start here shortly in 2015 in constructing them. And then we'll be moving forward with the future out years 16 and beyond relative to identifying those projects and bringing them forward to the capital improvement program through CLIC and everything else like our normal process with other capital projects. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions, but before I do that, I just want to recognize a couple of staff, Steve and David, who are here, who put in a lot of work putting together the policy and the lighting. Bill Prince is not here, but also put in a lot of effort on that. So I thank them for their time and effort on this. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you for the presentation, and we'll begin with Councilmember Bender, followed by Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity for a briefing by Mr. Mosing on this, so I have some specific questions that he and I discussed. So I'm generally supportive of the idea of shifting from sort of an optional system where people have to opt in to a non-voluntary system, because I think our pedestrian lighting is really part of our infrastructure, and it really shouldn't be patchwork or optional on these identified priority networks. I'm a little concerned about the ability, so if we're shifting basically from an assessment of specific property owners to our capital budget, which ultimately is paid for, by the taxpayers throughout the city, how that will impact our ability to build out our network over time. And if you look back at the map that you showed, what was the total cost of those segments? There's $1.6 million.
For the 4 that we had here?
For the 2015 program.
Yeah, those 4 were $1 million worth of projects.
So it's just, it illustrates sort of and you said as well, the $80 to $90 million figure over time to build out this network. So in my mind, I was separating it out between 2 different scenarios. One is that we have existing reconstruction projects where in the past, the idea was we were assessing property owners as part of the reconstruction cost. We were making that optional. But did you look at how much it would have cost like an individual property owner through our uniform assessment rate if we had continued to include the pedestrian scale lighting in reconstruction projects and just make it not, just part of the construction cost rather than making it optional. Because that would be another option for us to continue to build out our pedestrian street network system through reconstruction projects using our assessment, and then potentially additionally add funding to do a more proactive approach.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender, we did look at that last year or in 2013 when we adopted the direction that we did. And so the conclusion that I believe we came to was with street reconstruction projects, we wanted to include the street lighting in the project because we had a citywide goal that these streets were of importance to not just the adjacent property owners, but everybody in that regards. And we also recognize that we don't do a lot of street reconstruction projects in the city. Those are sometimes very expensive projects, and we need another mechanism to make some headway, albeit very small headway, towards trying to address locations where we want to improve pedestrian lighting. As I mentioned earlier, the good news is 1/3 of the system is lit. The bad news is we got 2/3 left to go. And the nominal $500,000 that we have going forward doesn't make progress very quickly. And that's what you're trying to get to. We have not re-examined how we're funding the street lighting system beyond the 2013 council direction that was offered.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chair, so if a reconstruction project came forward on a street that is part of the street lighting corridor network, are you saying that would then be part of the project cost?
Yes.
All right. So that would just that would be coming through our capital budget in the project cost. So we would expect to implement the pedestrian lighting on all reconstruction projects that are on the lighting corridor network, the pedestrian street lighting corridor network, as part of the construction costs. It's just that the city would be picking up that piece and it wouldn't be part of the assessment rate.
Correct.
Okay. And then in addition to that, we were looking at proactively implementing the criteria that you went through and implementing street lights, pedestrian scale street lights on streets that are not being reconstructed.
Yep, that is correct. So we're kind of getting two swings, at the challenge, one being when we reconstruct and two being this new pot of dollars to try to make progress.
And just one more question. At least in my ward, most of the roadways on this network map are county roads. And so I wondered, you mentioned that there may be some funding available, but I guess that kind of begs the question, why is the city paying for this part of the infrastructure system on county roads?
Well, I can maybe talk a little bit about history and maybe the why question. Historically, the county has participated in a variety of ways in help funding construction of street lighting. I'll use Lake Street as an example. The county went out and sought not only federal dollars, but their own dollars of resources that they would put in county roadways. Those dollars do not cover, in most parts, don't cover all of the street lighting needs, but a variety of things like streetscape, et cetera, were part of those projects. Also, historically, the county has a policy that street lighting is not their purview, but the local jurisdictional purview. And so while they're willing to contribute on the capital side, they're not and have not in the past operated nor maintained street lighting on their system. And so we can always ask the county to participate, but will they change that policy? That's a difficult discussion or challenge.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much. I have two questions, and they don't really have to do with the pedestrian priority corridors. One of them has to do with wood poles. And is our standard for the lighting on the wood pole then also going to be moving to the LED standard when the lanterns get replaced on all our wood poles?
Mr. Chair and Council Member, yes, we are working with our partner Xcel Energy about how they are coming up with LED fixtures for the wood pole system. We're starting on our metal pole system with high wattage fixtures. Those have a fairly quick payback. The lower wattage system, which is primarily a lot of the wood pole and some of our system, is in the 100 to 150 watt. The payback on simple one-for-one replacement is a very long-term investment. And so we're, from a context of Excel, looking in conversation with them, with rebates, and with the industry who's creating the fixtures, we're trying to come together with a plan that effectively moves us collectively, both us and Excel, to a LED system. We have not finalized and gotten to that point yet.
So if Excel's gonna, if there's a new construction and they're putting in wood poles now, will they be putting in the LED lights on the new wood poles? If it's a new street construction going in, or if they're replacing one maybe that fell over or something like that?
Mr. Chair and Council Member, Excel does not have a rate tariff nor a fixture that they've identified in that lower wattage area as of yet. And so if we had a wood pole go in tomorrow, the answer would be no to you, but we're trying to work to a yes on that equation. And when can we get to that yes is
Maybe
to be
we can help
determined.
use our clean energy partnership to move that forward.
Yep.
And we'll see.
And I think that's part of the conversation.
My other question has to do with areas of the city where we already have existing pedestrian level lighting, and there's two in the second ward that are informative case studies. And I also want my colleagues to be aware of this, and seems like it's addressed in the policy now, but I'm not sure if maybe we want to think about a little bit more of this. One instance is in Prospect Park where some poles actually were knocked down. They were assessed. They went through a petition process. It was quite a tumultuous period in the life of that neighborhood association, and then as the poles get knocked down in accidents and other situations, there's some questions about what does it get replaced with. And in this instance, the original lights weren't LED lights, and they had a very specific lantern that they all argued over. But it appears that when they were assessed, there wasn't any assessment done for buying replacement parts and keeping them on stock to come in. So, and I'm not sure that you can even address this now, but it's created a problem because some lights got replaced with LED lights that look very different and they don't have the same kind of lantern. And so I think what we need to figure out is what's our policy going to be, or do we need to refine the policy and making any kind of commitments about, and maybe getting any funds for how are these actually maintained when they fall over. I think actually they were replaced with poles that were we had handy that were even taller poles than their standards. So what about those standards? And I'm just going to jump to my other scenario, which is Southeast Como. And Southeast Como put in their pedestrian lighting maybe in the 60s, maybe in the 70s. It was quite a while ago, apparently with old technology that's been decaying. So they went through a process, whatever we had then, to get the pedestrian lights installed. This is kind of addressed, I forget whether we call it the life cycle or the end of service life, I guess, in the policy. But now they're having a problem because pedestrian lights are valued in the community, but it looks like they're going to have to be all removed and a whole new set brought in, and it's a real struggle to get that petitioning process on board. And I don't know if that's the right policy or not, whether or what we would do to say, yep, if the community's got pedestrian lights, we're going to make a commitment to maintain them until they petition out of them, rather than say you automatically lose them when we no longer have the technology or the staff or the ability to maintain them. And that's something to think about, because we'll see how, if the neighborhood's able, I think they're right now trying to see if they can petition back in to get the whole new assessment done, to get a whole new system. I'm sure you're aware of both of those neighborhoods in the situation. You could respond a little bit. I mostly wanted my colleagues to hear about it and for us to also be thinking as we're putting them all in now, and most of the policy is all about installation, who pays for installation. Well then, what kind of long-term commitment are we actually making to these lights?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon and the rest of the committee, I think I'll take just a few minutes to talk about that. Yes, I'm aware of both of those locations. And two, I wanted to reference, first of all, that the two locations that Councilmember Gordon was talking about are not pedestrian corridors. They're not on this map. They are our local residential system that petitioned in, and these aren't the only two that petitioned in metal pole lights into their local residential area. And I know a number of you are aware of that. And so I'll be glad to have further conversation with Councilmember Gordon and others on that subject matter, but I just wanted to make that subtle difference here in that regard. So,
thank you. Councilmember Yang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One is, with this new policy with regards to Minneapolis pedestrian street lighting corridor network, for the other streets, the streets that aren't so lucky to not be classified in this sort of way, and that we will continue to do the assessments on. I'm just wondering, are we thinking about doing an opt-in policy instead of an opt-out policy? Because, I think, and I'm talking about this with regards to 26th Avenue North. I feel like the amount of investment we're putting on there in terms of the construction and all that stuff, and, the assessments, are probably going to be great, but it would be a tragedy if we didn't get lights on there through our policy, but I think sometimes, given the nature of, let's say, Ward 5 and, sometimes the lack of participation from the residents, conceivably, it would just, be default that we'll put lights on there, we'll assess people, and, people will pay essentially double assessments because the street lighting is pretty expensive. And I'm wondering, are we, I guess, in the process of thinking about doing something like that? Because I reviewed the policy, and I guess I didn't see that part of it, and so I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Yang, the situation that you're talking about is a local residential street that doesn't fall on this pedestrian priority corridor map today. In the policy, there are, I'll say, a process and some steps on how to add streets to this map. And so there's that one component. I believe, if I'm understanding correctly, and I'll ask staff to correct me, but when we have a street that's not on this map, that's under reconstruction, the petitioning process is a opt-in. And I think the percentage is 70%. So we go out to them and we say, do I have that right? Do I have that incorrect? 51% opt out. That's right. That's right. So the reconstruction then says if the threshold's lower, but 51% of the folks can say, I don't want it, and then it's not put in that regards, based on them being assessed in that model in that regards.
Okay. Well, for my purposes, I'd love to see the process change to an opt-in instead of an opt-out. The second question, you had talked about a process for getting streets that are not on this map classified as pedestrian street lighting corridors, specifically, with regards to 26th Avenue North. Could you describe that process? Or?
Well, I can. Basically, it starts with a request and be brought forward and to Public Works, and then Public Works would provide a recommendation to this committee, and then the committee would decide to change the policy and put a new line on the map, so to speak. And so that's the basic steps in the process. We did want to make it too elaborate, but I believe it falls, I'm trying to find it, I think on page 8. And so for anyone who's interested in that.
Thank you, Councilor Yang. And actually, we had a similar conversation with Mr. Wirches insofar as 26th Avenue North and 18th Avenue Northeast are, eventually going to be combined as a east-west northern bike connector. And so my first suggestion per the policy would be to look at not just any one street, but all streets that encompass an off-road, an officially designated off-road facility that also has pedestrian components to it. And I would say perhaps other things that drive pedestrian use, parks, schools, small-scale commercial nodes. I'll note that though West Broadway is a very active pedestrian area because of its sort of traditional streetcars type street, merchant activity. But the east side of West Broadway does not have any of that activity. As we've discussed, it's more of a county freeway, for lack of a better term. And so these other areas that do have these institutional components and all these other facilities, such as an off-road bike trail and a robust sort of pedestrian activity driven by, again, schools, parks, and small-scale merchant commercial nodes, I think might be more appropriate in terms of supporting pedestrian use that exists versus, categorically saying pedestrians are here on the map, but are they really? And would they ever be? And so to that, I would just say explore that one type of generic category for future consideration, citywide. Any further conversation, discussion? You're ready to vote and probably go as well. So with that, all those in favor of approving the policy that we have before us, say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries.
Thank you.
Just going to ask if you got them.